I last traveled to the Czech Republic in 2018 during the celebration of the founding of Czechoslovakia in 1918. In addition to the more highbrow centennial content like concerts, exhibitions, and lectures, I came across advertisements that included elements of an idealized past. This commercialized nostalgia caused me to think critically about how nostalgia was coloring my perceptions and my decisions, and made me think about the value of nostalgia for the Czech makers of bluegrass-related music with whom I was doing my fieldwork. Considering the contexts of populism and pandemic in which fear prevails, I wanted to discuss the Malina brothers, Americanist Czech musicians, for whom nostalgia might serve as a form of capital and a way to negotiate towards hope in a dark time. First, some background. Bluegrass draws on the history of country music, including blackface minstrelsy, which forged American popular music's particular mixture of sentimental longing with the past with articulations of power by elite groups. Barn dance radio and television shows in the mid-1900s continued this tradition, with commercials selling old-fashioned and newfangled products backed up by banjos, mandolins, and guitars that were themselves a mixture of old and new. In the 1950s, when bluegrass was established and distinguished from other forms of country music, musicians, fans, and other stakeholders celebrated the acoustic instruments, old-fashioned song lyrics, and down-home manner of bluegrass, contrasting them with the raucous sounds of rock and roll and, implicitly, its links to black rhythm and blues. But, of course, this stance disregarded the importance of Afro-American elements in bluegrass. Recent calls to make America great again include a vague longing for the 1950s and are an example of what Svetlana Boym calls restorative nostalgia. By enacting immigration restrictions, limiting forms of expression, and supporting an idealized traditional family, nationalist and populist groups have sought to gain power by capitalizing on loss and fear, responding to a desire to make things like they used to be. Nostalgia is a powerful tool to deal with loss. Centuries after physician Johannes Hofer coined the term in 1688, psychological studies indicate that nostalgia can help provide meaning in life. Bluegrass songs of the late 20th and early 21st century seem to seek this kind of meaning through evocation of the past. For example, Tennessee 1949, written by Pete Goebel and Leroy Drum.
For many years I searched the wide world over for what I can't recall and didn't find. And now I'm searching pictures of my memory for Tennessee in 1949. Oh, oh, how I'd like to be back in the hills of Tennessee. Oh, oh, it would be so fine if I could just go back to 1949.
This song's protagonist seeks to return to an idealized past, to restore it, if only in fantasy. In addition to restorative tendencies that are usually very serious, Svetlana Boym describes a reflective nostalgia that's more playful, ironic, and humorous. John Hartford's song Back in the Good Old Days, a play on the English phrase back in the good old days, is an example. The final verse twists the song's lyrical hook by proposing that, oh, we did it then and we'll do it yet, back in the good old days, a turn that emphasizes the absurdity of our fascination with the past, even while it acknowledges its importance.
Oh, we'll all join hands and we'll gather round when that old guitar starts to make that sound. A lot of good things went down, down, down back in the good days. Ways in love with the people the good old days are past and gone. A lot of good people have done gone on. That's my life when I sing this song about back in the good days.
Of course, as in Boehm's account of post-communist memory, the restorative and the reflective are often in dialogue. For most of a decade, I've coached students in our program in bluegrass, old time, and roots music at East Tennessee State University to debate that, quote, bluegrass music today is primarily characterized by innovation, or that it's characterized by tradition. And the debate is always spirited, but the conclusion, inevitably, is that bluegrass as a business, as a style, and as a mode of community building is innovative and traditional, that it both restores faithfully and reflects critically on the past. The Malina brothers are a contemporary Czech group whose work evokes reflective connections to the past. A quartet made up of 3 family members, Luboš, Pavel, and Pepa Malina, are joined by bassist Pavel Porotka. The group is rooted not only in the region around the city of Náchod, but also in the distinctive Americanist music making that has flourished there since the heyday of groups like the White Stars, Rangers, Plavci, and the Greenhorns, or Zelenaci, in the 1960s to 70s. A key part of the Malina's repertoire is made up of songs retexted for local use by songwriter Miroslav Jaroš. For example, Tom T. Hall's Faster Horses, retexted as Rychlejší koně, and Hank Cochran's Make the World Go Away, retexted as Nech svět ať se točí dál.
Chceš stejně to, co já, rychlejší koně, mladší ženský, starší listy a víc peněz. Rychlejší koně, mladší ženský, starší listy a víc peněz. Nech svět, ať se točí dál, jen ho sundej z mých ramen. Říkej slůvka, co jsem znal, a nech svět, ať se točí dál. Já cítím, jak se podzim blíží, přijíždí s ním noční vlak. Únavou se mi oči blíží a letím pryč jak bílý pták.
In addition to their music, the band communicates visually with images from the American West. The art for their 2013 album Rychlejší koně presents a cowboy boot complete with spur on the cover. On the back panel of their 2015 disc, made with Nashville country music star Charlie McCoy, a cowboy hat hangs on a hook above the track listing. The band's stage setup for their 2019 tours included a number of Indian blankets. And when the group came to our home in Tennessee, a shoe store that sold cowboy boots was a highlight of their visit. Svetlana Boehm describes reflective nostalgia as more oriented towards an individual narrative that savors details and memorial signs, perpetually deferring homecoming itself. The Malina's longest tours have been in the United States, where they have learned to create interstitial niches of home away from home through music and the social interactions that draw audiences into liminal zones of possibility. The Malinas do this at home and abroad with the song Flowers on the Wall, which Luboš first heard on a record purchased by his parents, probably in the 1970s, and he later heard it in Quentin Tarantino's 1994 film Pulp Fiction.
A zahrajeme vám písničku, která pravděpodobně je nejstarší z těch, co dneska uslyšíte a co my zahrajeme. Ta písnička se jmenuje Flowers on the Wall a fanoušci Quentina Tarantina a filmu Pulp Fiction ji jistě budou dobře znát.
In playing the song, the Molinas brothers create a combination of connections and meanings. Literary theorist Linda Hutcheon proposes that, quote, nostalgia is not something you perceive in an object. It's what you feel when two different temporal moments, past and present, come together for you and often carry considerable emotional weight. Flowers on the Wall can be a point of connection to audiences distinctly Czech connoisseurship of American country music, a connection to childhood memories, or a cosmopolitan connection to contemporary cinema. Ethnomusicologist Mark DeWitt's discussion of social capital in a music scene highlights the importance of bonding and bridging connections to the sustainability of a community, connections that operate within boundaries of family, community, or group, and then those which cut across social divisions. Those are the bridging ones. We could see Flowers on the Wall as a bonding element, reinforcing elements we consider as český country, something that might play on a distinctively Czech station like country radio, or as something that might be discussed at a cosmopolitan conversation during the intermission of a concert at the Folkové prázdniny in Náměst nad Oslavou. That would be maybe more of a bridging conversation, potentially. Well, things aren't all positive here. Nostalgia can be part of exclusion, especially in a climate of populism and nationalism. Routledge et al. Indicate that nostalgia can increase social connectedness. A government or other regime could be supported by situations in which common feelings of nostalgia lead to exclusion, as with the immigration and family policies that I mentioned earlier. Well, finally, some hope. I'm inspired by people who go against the cultural inertia that leads us to contention and to personal gain. In his discussion of social capital, DeWitt tells the story of accordion player Danny Poyard, a tradition-bearing elder in the Northern California Cajun music and dance scene, who's freely shared his expertise with beginners. He even teaches lessons for free. Poyard's actions defy the logic of capitalism, which would expect exchange of economic capital for cultural capital. We usually pay for what we receive. Interpreting Poyard's strategy using theories of social capital, though, DeWitt describes this sort of exchange as stable and significantly as part of a sustainable cultural community. It's my hope that Americanist artistic entrepreneurs like the Molina brothers continue to disrupt the equations that we might associate with cultural activity and negotiate a sustainable career through their reframing of bluegrass and country music within Czech sensibilities, including those of irony and nostalgia. Linda Hutcheon points out productive links between these two ideas. The ironizing of nostalgia may be one way the postmodern has of taking responsibility for such responses by creating a small part of the distance necessary for reflective thought about the present as well as the past. The Molina's creation of reflexively rather than restoratively nostalgic experiences indicate that it might still be possible to draw from the past in ways that are viable in terms of ethics as well as aesthetics.